Well, hello, good evening. It's Thursday night, and this is VT Talk with myself, Dave Dawn, my partner in crime as ever was, the effervescent loveliness and bountiful beautiliciousness that is the one and only Sav. Evening, Sav, how are you doing?
Evening, Dave. I'm fine. How are you?
Good, good. Tonight, well, I'm good. I actually am good, and I'm all over the place. I'm in the presence of one of my heroes tonight. I shall introduce from middle to out over because tonight we've kind of got two. Well, it's one big theme really, and it's come out of what's been going on in Wales. As no doubt a lot of you are aware that there are plans afoot, as it were, to ban e-cigs in public enclosed places. In other words, to treat them as lit tobacco, and that's something that was also considered at quite some length, I understand, at the Public Health England meeting which I attended a week ago today, in the presence of my first guest, who is Professor Robert West from University College London, isn't it, Robert?
That's correct, yeah.
And what's your post and title there?
Right. Well, I'm Professor of Health Psychology and Director of Tobacco Studies in the Department of Epidemiology and Public Health. And I head up a team which is funded mainly by Cancer Research UK, whose goal is to find better ways of encouraging and helping people to stop smoking.
Yes, that's why I let Professor West do that rather than me, because there's quite a lot involved. But you're also the guy in charge of the smoking toolkit study, the bit where all the good figures come from. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so we'll be talking about that in a wee while, and also we have a Welshman on board. We have Pete Dermody. Good evening, Pete. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Dave. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. You're not nervous, are you?
A little bit, but I might be, yes.
Good man. That's what we like.
A
Bit of 54 milligram juice and a beer, and you'll be absolutely fine. And it'll all be good. So tonight we're going to be talking about Wales. We're going to be talking about the smoking toolkit study, medregs, all kinds of stuff. Professor West is with us for the first segment of the show, and I'm happy to have him for that length of time. I'd prefer to have you for 3 or 4 hours, Robert, because we could talk until the cows come home. But that's perhaps for another night when you are not as busy, because you've been very busy lately with this new study, haven't you?
I have been busier than I wanted to be. It would have been better if the Sun hadn't broken the embargo accidentally and leaked the story a day early, which meant that I had a lot more work to do than I was expecting.
Right. I love the way that you said they broke it accidentally.
Yeah, they really did, actually. To be fair to them, they were very apologetic, and these things happen, so I don't blame them. And if any of your viewers read The Sun as by way of apology, they have very kindly and unusually agreed to let me do a first-person piece on Tuesday, which I will have full copy approval over. So that would be nice. We'll see if it happens. I think it will.
Absolutely. You've heard it here first. Get your order in for The Sun on Tuesday. This is going to be worth a read. I suppose we better play the titles, really. And when we come back, well, you know what we're going to be talking about. Back in a sec. So there we go. It's VT Talk as ever was. Now, Professor West, at the Public Health England meeting last week, there was an awful lot of talking done about an awful lot of things, but you presented the results of the latest study based on the smoking toolkit. And just if anybody's not aware of the kind of bullet points of that, can you just tell everybody what it means?
Sure. Well, just to explain what the smoking toolkit study is, it sounds like a slightly weird name, the sort of thing that you might, roll your own type of study. But it's a study I started back in November 2006 because we were very keen to track on a very frequent basis, in fact monthly, what was happening in relation to smoking and people's attempts to stop smoking, what they were using, and how successful they were being, for all kinds of reasons. But one of them was so that we could evaluate the effectiveness of different methods of stopping. And so we've done a number of studies over the years looking at things like the effectiveness of the stop smoking services, where we've found high levels of effectiveness, so they're very good and good value. The effectiveness of prescription medications, and there's drugs like Champix, which you've probably come across. The effects of interventions like Stoptober, if any of your viewers have heard of that. So anyway, we've been able to do this study with these monthly surveys ever since then, and this has allowed us, when electronic cigarettes came onto the market and started to become popular, to track on a monthly basis their popularity, what they're being used for, and most importantly, whether they are really helping people to move away from smoked tobacco or not, because obviously there's a lot of claims being made one way or the other. And a number of things have come out of it. One is, just to give you the big picture, that and it's really important as scientists that we don't over-interpret our results, but just to present you with the simple associations that since e-cigarettes have become more and more popular, we have seen a increase in the rate at which people are stopping smoking, and an increase in the rate at which they're trying, and an increase in the rate at which they're succeeding. Now, that could be due to a whole range of things, but what we've also done, and this is why I've been very busy over the last couple of days, is to look specifically at people who've said that in the last year they used an electronic cigarette in their most recent quit attempt, compared with people who used licensed nicotine patches which they bought from a shop, not with professional support, or nothing at all. And we found that those people who'd used an electronic cigarette were about 60% more likely still not to be smoking compared with those other two groups. And when you're doing a study like that, because it's not an experiment, you have to be very careful to try to adjust for as many things as you can which might account for those differences. Got nothing absolutely to do with e-cigarettes. Like, for example, e-cigarette users tend to be a little bit older. They tend to be in higher sort of status occupations. They tend to be inclined to stop gradually rather than abruptly, which actually is not necessarily a good thing. And they tend to be more nicotine dependent to start with. So once you take all of those things into consideration, the bottom line is that we still found that about the success rate was about 60% higher.
It's interesting that, because at the same time as all of this came out, ASH released its figures from its YouGov survey, which showed 700,000 fully switched e-cig users. That's ex-smokers in their terminology, and around about 1.4 million current smokers, or dual fuelers as we would know them. And at the same time as all this was happening, in fact the day after the Public Health England thing, Jean-Francois Etter published his study, which has come up with a figure of 6% relapse at a year for e-cig users. And I don't know how familiar you are with that study, but how does all of that tie in together when you're looking at over a period of 10 years, for instance? The NHS trumpeted very loudly towards the end of last year that this was their flagship product, sort of style. 147,000 ex-smokers due to the stop smoking services and NRT and what have you. And then over a 3-year period, as Ash has said, we see 700,000 folks that are no longer smoking because of e-cigs. How does that fit with what you already know?
Yeah, well, I have to bear some responsibility for the NHS trumpeting, because that was our study as well.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, what you have to do is when you're trying to figure out how many people have been helped by a particular kind of method of doing something or intervention to stop smoking, you have to try and factor in the numbers who would have achieved the same result with some other method. And Because we've got a lot of data, we know what the rates are at which people are trying to stop smoking, and we know what the rates are at which people succeed if they just go cold turkey and don't use anything, or if they use these different products. And with the NHS Stop Smoking services, they actually, a very much larger number have actually stopped using with the services. But what we did was we said, okay, we're going to discount a very large proportion of those because we think that they would have stopped anyway if they had just used a prescription medication and not got the specialist behavioural support that the services provide. So the way I kind of think of it is that for most smokers, smokers aren't stupid. They don't want to die early, and on the other hand, some smokers want to carry on with nicotine and others don't. So what we need to do is to provide as many exit routes as possible, and the best possible ones, and give people an opportunity to keep trying them until they find that exit route. And the earlier a person finds that exit route, the longer they live and the happier they are. And literally the happier they are, because we've also studied that and found that people who stop smoking are happier. So, what we really want to see is as many ways that people can find that suit them, because everyone's different, that suit them as a way out of the deadly thing. And if there are people who, want to carry on using nicotine, that's absolutely fine, because nicotine in itself is not harmful. At least not harmful to the vast majority of people. There's a very small group of people who have a genetic predisposition to vascular disease, but mostly it's fine. And so, that's our job. And I think probably where I part company with some of my colleagues is that for me, it's not a moral issue. It's not a puritanical issue. If smoking wasn't bad for you, I would be doing something else. It's just purely, we want to find ways of helping people to live longer and happier. That's it.
Well, you've answered one of the questions that I wanted to pose to you, which was about the harmfulness of nicotine. That's been taken care of. But when you're talking about making all of the possible avenues available, what's your stance on this whole? Because I really couldn't get a feel for the room last Thursday when it came down to medicinal regulation of e-cigs. What's your stance on that?
I have over the years that we've been discussing this, it really is years, changed my mind quite a few times, and I may yet change it again. Let me just put the pros and cons, and then you and your viewers can just decide or have a think about it. The pros of medicinal regulation are that it's a higher level of quality control in terms of nicotine content and consistency of delivery and quality of product. And so, for example, if let's say it just so happened that there was a batch of e-cigarettes that for some reason had been poorly manufactured and they were delivering something bad, and some people got seriously harmed by it. With medicinal regulation, you have very tight batch control so that you can trace it back and say, all right, it was this batch that was made on this day in this plant, and then you can deal with it. That's all good. The downside, and it is a very, very serious downside, is that because it's not designed for products such as e-cigarettes, where there's rapid innovation, and the drug itself, nicotine, is very, very well known. It's an extremely well understood drug. It's like a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It's very, very expensive, and it takes an awful long time. And I think I've become convinced by my colleagues who say that it would just simply put an end nearly to all innovation in the area, and would lay pretty much the field open to the large pharmaceutical companies and the tobacco industry who've got the funding to invest in this sort of thing. So, I mean, there's two products that have been going through this process, both actually linked to the tobacco industry, for the last, over a year, and it's costing millions, and it's taking an awful long time. And that's with what the regulators call light touch regulation. So what I'd really love to see, and I just, I think it is possible. I would like to see some sort of bespoke regulation which is suitable for this particular product, where you can have the guarantees that the users want, that they're getting something, they're getting what they expect and not getting anything else. You get that. You can have the marketing restrictions, not marketing to young people, not selling to young people, etc., etc. That's all fine, but it doesn't cost a fortune to go through those hoops. If it took, I don't know, 3 months or 6 months even to get a license, and it cost 50,000 quid, I think most e-cigarette manufacturers would say, well, that's fair enough. If we could achieve that, then I think that would be great. But at the moment, it doesn't. It's not looking terribly likely.
That was my next question. Do you think there's any likelihood of that? I don't know whether you're aware of the European Free Vaping Initiative. This is a European citizens' initiative to. We need 1 million signatures basically to get the Commission to actually listen to us. And we would be trying to put the case for exactly what you've mentioned, bespoke regulation for e-cigs, and I'm hoping that by what you've just said, that you would back us all in that.
Yeah, I think I would, and so would a lot of people. It's actually, the situation is much worse in continental Europe than it is in this country, because really some of their regulators are really crazy, I would say.
That's definitely a word for it. And you saying that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that brings me. You've reminded me that we do need to talk about Mark Drakeford in Wales, since you used the word crazy. Have you been following this notion of a ban on e-cig use in public places in Wales, and if so, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I have been asked about it quite a bit, and okay, so it's not entirely clear to me what it's based on. It may be based on some misconceptions, because obviously, politicians, they're not experts, and so they rely on expert advice. And I think that sometimes they're getting, perhaps not such expert advice. But it's tricky when you don't know yourself, and so sometimes you go for what seems to be the easy option. So anyway, my view is that the acid test is: would we have been able to pass legislation to ban smoking in indoor public areas if instead of smoking it was vaping, in terms of the health risk to the people who are standing nearby? And the answer has got to be that it would never have been passed. And the reason for that is that any risk that there might be to someone standing near someone who's vaping is so small as to be, insignificant. I mean, it's really nonsensical to imagine that there's a significant risk. So if there isn't a health risk, why are you doing it? And one of the arguments that's put forward in the Welsh Assembly is the concern about it renormalising smoking. And I think you can argue that either way. It's possible that might have been the case, or it's also possible that it actually is doing the opposite. It's possible that it actually denormalizes smoking by normalizing vaping. So the question is, what does the evidence show? And as far as we can see, our evidence in England, we don't have data in Wales, but we have data in England, is that there's not even a tiniest suggestion of renormalization of smoking. All of the markers show that, if anything, the opposite is happening. So I don't think that the renormalization argument is really a terribly strong one on the basis of the data. And then you get the argument, it sort of undermines the smoke-free legislation, because people will get confused about whether people are vaping or smoking, and this obviously is nonsense, because there's no question of mixing the two up. They just are so completely unlike each other. And as your viewers will know, if you're using a second generation or third generation device, it doesn't even remotely look like a cigarette. So there again, I think the argument doesn't hold. Having said that, and excuse me for sort of going on, if a given establishment decides, for whatever reason, that it just, for its customers and so on, that it would rather not have people vaping, then that's fine. That's up to it. It's a matter of their choice. But
Yes.
to legislate for it does not seem proportionate.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. And if anybody wondered why Professor West is one of my heroes, you now know. What I get from you all of the time, every time I listen to you, I hear truth, I hear balance, I hear reason, and I hear logic, and I like that. I'm now, however, going to subject you to a few seconds of a barrage of questions from chat, because I'm fairly sure we've got some. Sav?
Oh, we have. We've got an awful lot, and I don't think I'm going to get through them all. So I'll start at the top. And apologies if you've already answered some of these, but I'm just going to read down the list because there's lots. Bob in chat says, what does Professor West think of the proposed 20 milligram nic juice limit? Would he be in favour of higher nic juice like 45 milligrams on general sale?
Let's take that straight away. Robert?
Yes, I wouldn't support that limit. I think that it's based on a misconception, which is related to the idea that the amount of nicotine that someone takes in from their electronic cigarette is related to the concentration in the liquid. The concentration in the liquid sets a kind of upper limit on what you can achieve with a given puff, but we've known with smokers for years that it's actually the smoker and the way that they smoke the cigarette that dictates how much nicotine they take in. So, for example, your viewers may not know this, but you could easily smoke a cigarette and get 6 milligrams of nicotine from it and make yourself violently sick. People don't do that. What they do is they titrate their nicotine intake to about 1 milligram on average because they can and because they're looking for a particular dose. And the same is true for electronic cigarettes, that what you need to do is to have a high enough concentration so that people who need a particular dose from a particular puff can get that and then allow them to titrate their dose to whatever it is they need. So this concentration in the liquid doesn't really make any sense.
Good. Sav?
Next question comes from one of our German listeners, Steffi, and she says, question to Professor West. We had an article in the Doctor's News today where they said that the study isn't relevant because it's not a controlled study. How do we argue against that?
Yes, the argument that it's not a randomized controlled trial is something we actually deal with in the paper, which is that nowadays, those of us working in public health and in clinical medicine recognize that you need many different forms of evidence in order to be able to answer the questions that are important. If we were to do a randomized controlled trial, it would have some benefits and some costs. A major benefit would be for the specific product we were testing against whatever it was we were testing it against, we would have a pretty confident idea about what the difference between those two things was. But when you consider how many different products there are on the market, how quickly they are developing, when you consider the fact that the only people you could test it on would be people who are willing to be randomized not to receive a product that they wanted, you can see the limitations of that methodology. By the time the study was done, it would be guaranteed that the product that you were testing would be obsolete and not on the market anymore, which is the case for the 2 randomized trials that have been done. So randomized trials are important, but they're only part of the picture.
Indeed. Sav? Sorry.
So we did. So just quickly, what we did was to answer in the best way that we possibly could the question that needed to be answered within the timescale that we need. And you then have to say what level of confidence you've got in those data. And one thing I would say on that is that very same methodology is the same methodology that other people have quite happily accepted when we've been looking at the effectiveness of other methods.
Excellent stuff. Sav?
Yeah, Becky has said, I didn't use vaping as a quit attempt. I used it to switch. Is nicotine something Professor West is happy to see me use long term to prevent relapse, if nothing else?
It's all up to me. It's this is the thing. I'm very much against people telling each other what to do on things that don't affect other people. So, but if in terms of your health, I think if all you're doing is taking in nicotine, then obviously the health consequences are minuscule. There may be some other consequences in terms of the propylene glycol irritant in the lungs, but you'll find out, and it's up to you. So, and I do recognise that a lot of people who switch from cigarettes to electronic cigarettes don't consider themselves as having stopped smoking, and I think that's an identity thing, and I perfectly well understand that. I think if you're happy, I'm happy, is what I'd say.
Excellent stuff, Sav.
Moonlit has said, I wonder if the figures of people actively trying to stop smoking line up with the ones using e-cigs, i.e. didn't intend to quit but accidentally did. And Mitch Dog has said, I accidentally switched, casually tried e-cigs and hugely preferred them to smoking. Was a complete no-brainer, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm going to dive in on that one and say my story's exactly the same. I had absolutely no intention of... In fact, I was a resolute anti-smoker from the point of view that I even had my doctor put on me notes, stop asking him to quit, he's not gonna. Because it just got me set in that mindset, and from 60 a day to 0 a day in 5 days because I just preferred e-cigs. Does that factor in, do you think, from the figures that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge to our methodology because we're so used to assuming that the only people who quit smoking are people who try to quit. And now we're in a situation where people, as you say, sort of accidentally quit because they find something that they prefer, and we're going to have to adjust our methodology to take that into account. I mean, to some extent we can, because part of what we do is we just simply ask people whether they're using an e-cigarette, and then we follow them up and find out what happened, and we'll get more and more data on that. It's very early days; we don't have the data yet, but when we do, we'll get a better sense of what proportion of people who switch are people who did so, with a very clear intention they were going to do it from the start, as opposed to people who just found that they preferred it.
It is quite amazing. Now, I am aware that your time is precious, so I'm going to ask Sav, have we got much more, or?
We have. I'll skip the comments and just go straight to the questions because we've got quite a few. One that's come from Silver Zero, who says, question for Professor West. Have any tobacco researchers in the US expressed interest in implementing the toolkit across the pond?
Yes is the answer, but it's and in fact it's a kind of interesting story about the difference between the US and the UK is that over the last few years there's been a lot of interest in having a toolkit study in the States, and the net result is that they've actually got a much more expensive version of it, which unfortunately doesn't do what the toolkit does. It's sort of, things got out of hand a little bit, and it's going to be a great study what they do, but it isn't going to answer the questions that the toolkit answers. So I think that there will be now a sort of resurgence of interest in this because it's not an expensive study to do. There are sort of bureaucratic issues that might get in the way, but hopefully, we will see something like that start up. One of the problems is that you only really start to see a lot of value from a study like this after it's been running a while, and so you can really track, the changes in what's going on.
Right, Sav?
Right, another one came from Vape and Sam. He says, with properly applied and observed age restrictions, does it matter if a company markets in a way that looks like targeting children if at the end of the day they can't obtain them?
That's a good question. I mean, the trouble is that the story with tobacco cigarettes is that children can obtain them, and so it's tricky. I think many of us, probably most of your viewers, would feel uncomfortable with any advertising that targets children. I mean, I think in my sort of utopian world, people would be spending their money on things that didn't harm them and gave them really satisfaction and pleasure in life. And there's a lot of things that young people can spend their money on apart from nicotine that is going to give them pleasure. So I think I'd feel uncomfortable about any marketing that even looked as though it was targeting children. And in fact, as far as the the vast majority of electronic cigarette users and the manufacturers are concerned, that's absolutely fine, because there's, just in England, there's 8.5 million smokers out there to target, and across the world there's 1 billion. So I don't think they're going to struggle for customers.
So there's still a few bob to be made.
I think so.
Yes. Is there much more, Sav? Because it's
Got
rapidly
3
running
more.
out. Okay.
Marco on the team says, does Professor West think that e-cigs are a gateway to smoking for children, as this is an argument we get thrown at us all the time?
The answer is that we have no way of testing this at the moment, because there aren't enough children using them to make, contrary to what some people have claimed, to test the hypothesis. So as and when, if and when children ever start using e-cigarettes in large numbers, we might stand a little bit of a chance of testing that idea. The reason it's really interesting, this whole gateway thing, some of your viewers, again, may be aware of all this gateway argument about cannabis and hard drugs. And I edit a journal called Addiction, and we've published a number of papers looking at this. And it's incredibly hard to show gateway effects. You can't just say, oh, someone used this soft drug, then they went on to use this hard drug, therefore the soft drug was a gateway, which is the sort of, the fallacy that people like Stan Glantz have a trap that they've fallen into. Because you don't know whether the people who use the soft drug just happen to be the same kind of people who would use the hard drug. There are ways of studying it. I mean, they're quite complicated in terms of the study design. But no one has done anything remotely like that. So at the moment, I would say there's absolutely no evidence of gateway effects. And we may never be in a position to test it, because there may never be enough, fortunately, probably, children who take up e-cigarettes.
All good. Sav?
Mark Shaw has asked, does Professor West think the evolution of a subculture of vapors is a good or bad thing in the eyes of public health?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I can claim to speak for public health on this one. Certainly in my eyes, I think anything that gives people satisfaction and pleasure and reason to get up in the morning is a jolly good thing. So I don't have a problem with it. I would say to people who are thinking about continuing to use e-cigarettes indefinitely, to pay close attention to what's coming out in terms of the evidence on the potential harms. It's not going to be like cigarettes, but propylene glycol is an irritant in the lungs, and some people, just like with anything, some people are going to react more than others. So obviously, we'd rather have a society in which people are, as healthy as possible and happy and doing what they want to do. I think the likelihood is that, over the years we'll find that, there are some people who probably, suffer from vaping and will need to stop, and others that can, carry on.
Indeed. And the last one, Sav.
The last question comes from Kizzy, and Kizzy says, why isn't Professor West on my voting slip? We could have someone with sense running the country.
I honestly wish that was the case. I really do. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to come and talk to us tonight, Robert. It's been a great pleasure. I'll freely admit I've been more nervous tonight than I have been most nights.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure for me, I have to say. And now I'm going to have a nice glass of wine.
That would be your drug of choice.
That's my drug of choice.
Be careful. Be careful, because action on alcohol will be taking over from action on sugar and action on salt. It's going to be that way. But for the time being, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll come back and join us again, because it's the truth. We hear the truth from you, and I really, really like that. And I'll see you on it's the 12th and 13th of June, isn't it?
Indeed. Yes. Well, I look forward to it. Yeah.
Are you coming into the vaping session, that one?
I don't know. It depends what else I'm scheduled to do. But if I'm not doing anything else, I will. There's even a talk of I play guitar. Some of you might know. I don't know. But there's even talk of getting me with another couple of smoking people to do a gig in the evening. So we'll see.
Get me a set of drums. I'll join you.
Yeah. Oh right, you're a drummer. Okay, you're in.
Yes. I'm not a proper musician, but I'm a proper vapor. That's all that really matters. So. Once again, thank you very much, Professor Robert West, for joining us tonight. I hope you'll come back again. We're going to take some adverts now, and when we come back, we'll be talking about Welsh Wales. And Pete, who's been sat there very quiet, listening and taking it all in, will get a chance to open his mouth. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. iVapor and iVapor Elixir, based in Yorkshire, for your e-cig needs. That's ivapor.co.uk and ivapor-elixir.co.uk. iVapor and ivapor-elixir.co.uk are proud sponsors of vaportrails.tv. And we're back in the room. Professor West has now left us, but I'm gonna go straight to Pete Dermody in Wales. What did you make of what Robert West had to say, Pete?
Well, the hairs on the end of my arms are standing up, to be honest, because I'm in awe of that man. You know, he speaks the truth, and yeah, I'm shaking. I don't know if it's the nerves of being on the show or you know what he's just said, but that man is a legend. He is, and he speaks the truth.
He is a bit, isn't he? And we'd heard from one or two people that my mic might have been a bit quiet, so I've turned it up. I hope that's okay for everybody now. And before we get on to Wales in its entirety, and we probably are going to run over tonight, and I do apologise at the outset. I've got the news from Dodo Box HQ, which I do like to go through, and what I've been told is a month ago we were at 30% of our total target, and we've just passed 40%. We've hit our target signature number for the last 3 consecutive weeks. Well done, everybody. They're saying thank you to everyone who you see, this is what's happened. Professor West's got me tongue-tied now. Thank you to everyone who contributed to the Dodo Nation drive. We reached our target of £2,000 in just 3 days. And people ask why I'm proud of the vaping community. That is fabulous. As a result of the Dodo Nations, another 1,000 Dodo boxes have been ordered. And, they've just heard, they're being dispatched today, so they'll probably be there tomorrow or Saturday. And EFVI-UK.co.uk are not going to be waiting for shops to come to them anymore. They're going to be proactively sending the new boxes to a further 350 vape shops. But they do need help. There are probably thousands of signatures sitting out in boxes all around the country, but they're struggling to get them collected on a regular basis, so anybody can help. Simply by volunteering to visit your local shop once a month to empty the Dodo box, that's all you need to do. Even if you can't enter the signatures into the online system, they can do it. It can be done, so just contact them. You know the email, dodobox@efvi-uk.co.uk. And as you heard Professor West say, it's going to be a damned good idea if we could get bespoke regulation, and this is a step towards that. There's no guarantee it's going to pay off, but if it is going to pay off, we need to get the signatures, and we need to get the signatures entered and get it done. So thumbs up to all of that. Let's see if we can really give this a kick up the backside and really get it moving. I'd like to see that happen. I think it's a fabulous initiative, and I think it's fabulous the work that everybody's doing. Well done to all involved. Do you second that, Pete?
Yes, I do, and I've actually got some news with regards to the EFVI. I'm in contact with the Ridian man, who I didn't realise only lives 2 minutes from the corner from me. And what's happened, he's got in contact with ITV and S4C, which is the Welsh version of Channel 4. And they shall be in Swansea, I believe, one evening next week, because they want to do a programme about the EFVI. So EFVI is actually going to get some media attention, in Wales at least.
Wow. That's fabulous news. EFVI on the telly. If that doesn't get 1 million signatures, I don't know what and I'd love to think that we got 1 million signatures in the UK. Not that I'm being competitive or anything, but let's see the rest of the continent catch up with that. Right, now, in Wales, since we're talking about Wales, you are going through a tottering time there with this Mark Drakeford bloke. What is he, Minister for Health or something?
Yes, he is a Minister for Health. He actually turned up to my work the other day to do some lecture on social science, and I was in two minds to go and give him a piece of my mind. But I thought that my job's more important than going to, I couldn't risk it to go and have a word with him.
Indeed. Well, I've got the footage from the Senedd on the 14th of May, so it's a little bit late. I do appreciate that. I've edited it down. It actually ran 38 minutes and 22 seconds, but I've been in and taken most of Mark Drakeford out because I think everybody knows exactly what he was going to say, and a lot of the points that he raised, Professor West has answered absolutely brilliantly, I think. But just so you can get a flavour of what's going on, I've managed to get it down to around about 20 minutes. So we'll play that in, and then Pete and I will have a little bit of a natter. I'm thinking it's probably going to be near 1:15 when we're finished. So if you've already seen this and you need to take the dog for a walk, just chuck it out in the backyard and let it have a little whittle, and it'll go straight into adverts when it's finished. So here we go. This is what happened in the Senedd on May the 14th with all due, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm bowing in the direction of the BBC because that's where it came from.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, and I am grateful to colleagues across the Chamber for allowing this debate time on the Assembly floor this afternoon. It was once said, Presiding Officer, that those who ever valued liberty for its own sake believe that to be free to choose and not to be chosen for is an inalienable ingredient in what makes human beings human. And of course, as human beings, we are capable of choosing wrongly, choosing foolishly, and choosing downright recklessly. And there will always be and continue to be a tension between when it is correct and right for the state to choose for us and limit the personal freedoms of the individual, especially when those freedoms impact negatively on the freedoms of others, or when there is a clear societal benefit from intervention by the state. And it is that balance, I believe, that is at the heart of the debate this afternoon, certainly for me and my colleagues in the Welsh Liberal Democrats. However, I do appreciate that perhaps such philosophical niceties do not excite others in the same way that they do for Liberal Democrats. So I would like to concentrate on the very practical arguments about why e-cigarettes should not be banned in enclosed public spaces, as is currently being consulted upon by the Welsh Government as part of its public health proposals. That there is no justification for such a ban, no evidence to support such a ban, and indeed such a ban could lead to potential improvements in public health being lost. Improvements in public health which lie at the heart of a much-needed Government of Wales public health bill. Now, there is no doubt that e-cigarettes are increasingly visible in our society, whether that be in points of sale or indeed people using them. According to a survey commissioned by Ash, 3% of smokers reported using e-cigarettes in 2010. That had increased to 7% in 2012 and 11% in 2013. An estimated 2.1 million people use the products, 1/3 of those being ex-smokers and 2/3 being current smokers. And the main reason given by those e-cigarette users for their usage is that they are using those products to help them stop smoking, or they're using them to help them stay stopped. I believe that the evidence is accumulating that e-cigarettes are an increasingly effective method of nicotine replacement and a method of allowing people to reduce their harm from tobacco. And let us be clear, nicotine replacement is already recognised as an effective way of reducing harm from tobacco, as evidenced by NICE. What we do know is that smoking levels in Wales, despite all the efforts of governments and those working in the fields, remain stubbornly high, and we have signed up to a harm reduction policy. So why pursue this curtailment of people's freedom and restrict the use of nicotine replacement products that many people are successfully using to help them stop smoking? Is it to protect other people from the effects of those products? Well, the Minister himself has admitted that he is not aware of any such evidence that e-cigarettes impact harmfully on those that don't use the product. Nor is there actually any evidence of what the Minister says he is frightened of, and that is e-cigarettes being a gateway into tobacco usage and the normalising effect of smoking. In fact, a recent YouGov survey of 12,000 UK e-cigarette users for us showed that there is no evidence from that research that e-cigarettes are acting as a gateway into smoking. The results also showed that regular use of e-cigarettes amongst children and young people is extremely rare and is confined almost entirely to those young people who have already tried traditional tobacco products. Research undertaken by Queen Mary University in London found that a child trying a tobacco cigarette for the first time is 50% likely to become a regular smoker. The same research found no evidence that a child trying an e-cigarette for the first time goes on to be a regular vaper. Now, Professor John Britton, who leads the Tobacco Advisory Group for the Royal College of Physicians, says, nicotine itself is not a particularly hazardous drug. It is something on a par with the effects you get from caffeine. If all smokers in Britain stopped smoking cigarettes and started smoking e-cigarettes, we would save 5 million deaths in people who are alive today. It is a massive potential public health prize. The issue is, will that prize be jeopardised by the government's actions? I'd like to ask the Minister what assessment has he carried out of the unintended consequences of banning these products and putting them in the same class as traditional tobacco products. The Minister admits that there is no evidence of second-hand health risks from e-cigarettes. What research has he done into the health impact of e-cigarette smokers being sent out and banished to the smoking sheds with traditional tobacco smokers? Many people that I have asked via my own website and via social media say that that could drive them back to smoking traditional cigarettes when they have managed to cut down or quit smoking altogether. Now, some people have rightly raised the issue about confusion e-cigarettes cause with regarding the enforcement of the current smoking ban. But as Ash say on the subject, the most noticeable thing about tobacco smoke isn't the smoke itself, but it is the very distinctive and lingering smell. A very quick inspection will, and does, very quickly clear up any potential confusion. Colleagues, Welsh Liberal Democrats and I am still very supportive of the ban on smoking in public places. We are very supportive of the ban of packaging on traditional tobacco products. But without evidence forthcoming from this government, we will not be in a position to ban the use of e-cigarettes in public places as proposed by the Welsh Government. It is an infringement on people's personal liberty and it does not deliver for the public health agenda.
Julie Morgan.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer, for calling me to speak in this very important debate, which I know has at its heart the health of the people in Wales, and I know that we all share a common goal here, that we want people in Wales to be as healthy as they possibly can. I have no problem voting for this motion because if I read the motion, it asks for evidence from the Welsh Government to justify their proposals, which I think it is a good thing to ask for the evidence. So I am happy to vote for the motion, although personally I back the proposal that e-cigarettes should be treated the same way as ordinary cigarettes and that they should be banned in public places and in workplaces. So given that we just don't know what their effects are, I think that above all else we must proceed with caution. What also seems ominous to me is the fact that tobacco companies are moving into the market and, for example, are able to advertise e-cigarettes on television. They can't advertise actual cigarettes, of course, but often market e-cigarettes in the same way that cigarettes themselves were marketed. And this is all part of the expression that we've used of renormalising smoking. And for the tobacco companies, there is money to be made from both cigarettes and their electronic equivalent. This movement into the market and the promotion of the image and habit of smoking should raise alarm bells, I think. But I really think that with a project like this, when we don't know what is in it, that the Health Minister and the Public Health Department are right to proceed with caution and to consider treating them in the same way as other cigarettes.
But I support the motion set out wholeheartedly and join the calls on the Welsh Government to bring forward the evidence behind the proposals on electronic cigarettes to provide clarity on the justification for these proposals within the Public Health Bill. I'm bound to say that I was extremely surprised at the draconian measure of banning electronic cigarettes, a powerful weapon, I feel, in the fight against smoking from public and workplaces. I know of many people, and Kirsty Williams is absolutely right, who use them as a basic aid to remove the need for cigarettes. In fact, when I see people using them, I very often ask them why they are using these e-cigarettes, and it's always the case that they want to give up cigarettes. So surely a device that emits water vapour is always going to be safer than a normal tar-filled cigarette. In fact, might I suggest that a piece of work is commissioned to provide an analysis of the benefits to people who currently smoke normal cigarettes, who move to electronic cigarettes. I should imagine they would be enormous, both for long-term financial pressures on the NHS and for society at large. Now, this proposed piece of legislation sends completely the wrong message, and I firmly believe that as a relatively new legislator, new laws should be based on evidence and not on a whim. The health benefits aside, I want this Assembly to consider the unintended consequences of these short-sighted measures as well. Now, in Gower, for example, we have a thriving electronic cigarettes industry, and in South Wales West there are companies both directly and indirectly benefiting from this industry. Many jobs are dependent together with livelihoods, and this measure puts all of that in jeopardy.
Elin Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My aim in contributing to this afternoon's debate is to clearly note my own personal view on this issue, namely that I have yet to come to a particular conclusion as to whether smoking of e-cigarettes should be banned in public places. That I am open-minded and sitting on the fence at present, and I support the motion today as it is tabled because it does call for additional evidence, and that's what someone like myself is seeking.
I call on the Minister for Health and Social Services to speak on behalf of the Government. Mark Drakeford.
Diolch, Llywydd. Setting out the position concerning e-cigarettes as it appears in the Public Health White Paper, it does not, as the mover of the motion so mistakenly suggested, propose a ban on e-cigarettes. It does not propose new restrictions on their sale. It does not even contain a firm commitment to bring their use into line with conventional cigarettes by restricting their use in enclosed public places. Rather, it asks for views and further evidence on the idea that such a ban would be beneficial to public health in Wales. 3 key propositions are set forward in the White Paper in support of that proposition. That exempting e-cigarettes from the ban makes its enforcement more difficult. That allowing e-cigarettes to be used in enclosed public spaces contributes to the renormalisation of smoking, and that e-cigarettes act as a gateway product, introducing a new generation to that harmful habit. Now, within the time that I've got available, I'm not going to be able to cite the sources for the evidence that I'm going to contribute to the debate this afternoon, but I will make it available to members after the debate immediately, giving them specific research citations for all the evidence that the motion quite rightly calls for, and which I am confidently able to provide. That e-cigarettes are undermining the ban this chamber put in place, making it more difficult to enforce. E-cigarettes are the only method which involves the ingestion of highly addictive nicotine directly into the lungs.
I call on Darren Miller to reply to the debate.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to all of those members who've taken part in what has been a fascinating and interesting debate. There's no doubt that there'll be more of these debates in the coming months as the Public Health Wales Bill White Paper continues to get some attention. But I have to say, I'm a little disappointed with the response of the Minister to this debate. I think to describe some of the evidence which has been presented as being cavalier has been quite extraordinary, particularly given that it wasn't actually Kirsty Williams who was saying that nicotine wasn't harmful or was only as harmful as tobacco. It was actually Professor John Britton of the Royal College, the Royal Pharmaceutical College. And I just think it's, we need to tone this debate down, look at the evidence clinically, and frankly, the evidence at the moment doesn't stack up in favour of a ban. What we do know, some of the facts that we do know, are that there are around 100,000 people in Wales using electronic cigarettes in 2014, and a third of those are ex-smokers. Over 30,000 people have given up and quit smoking as a result of the support which they've been able to glean from reducing the harm that they can cause by inhaling tobacco smoke and switching to e-cigarettes. I think that that is a huge cause for elation that we should be celebrating here in Wales, and not something that we should be downcast about. Julie Morgan is quite right. The biggest public health intervention that we can make in Wales is to reduce the number of people who are smoking tobacco. E-cigarettes are an extremely useful tool, as demonstrated by the clear evidence from Wales itself, that we can see major results in this respect by supporting people in switching to the less harmful effects of e-cigarettes compared to smoking tobacco. So when you consider that sort of information and those sorts of figures, I think it's very hard to conclude that we should have an all-out war on people being able to opt for e-cigarettes. And I do think that putting people in harm's way by encouraging them, by implementing a ban, forcing them into the smoking sheds alongside people who are smoking, particularly when they are trying to quit themselves, is putting them in temptation's way, which could cause them to reignite their passion for smoking. Let's just look at some of the evidence that is out there. There's not a great deal of evidence that e-cigarettes are a gateway to smoking tobacco. ASH commissioned some work on this, and they showed that regular use of e-cigarettes amongst children and young people is very rare, and that it is confined almost entirely to those who have currently or previously smoked. The majority of studies show that those young people who are experimenting with electronic cigarettes are current smokers or experimenters, and there's very little evidence of never smokers actually trying them. ASH have also said that there's no evidence that e-cigarettes are acting as a gateway to smoking. Ellen Jones cited the fact that 71% of those people that they surveyed said that they used them to help them quit their habit. And interestingly, 48% use them to reduce the amount of tobacco that they smoke without stopping completely. So if the government's aim is harm reduction, then there's clear evidence stacking up in support of e-cigarettes being a major tool for harm reduction from smoking here in Wales. I know you're shouting rubbish from a sedentary position.
Sorry, nobody's
Minister,
shouting.
but I
Nobody's
really do
shouting.
think that to rubbish this, I do think that to rubbish evidence, academic evidence, which has been provided in various studies, is quite alarming. A recent publication in The Lancet, July 2013, stated that the chemicals that make cigarettes dangerous are either absent in electronic cigarettes or present only in trace conditions. The risk, and I quote here Professor Robert West from University College London, the risk is negligible, and compared with smoking, there is absolutely no contest. So rather than being a gateway to smoking, they're a gateway out of it. Conventional nicotine replacement therapies have a 90% failure rate in helping people to quit. E-cigarettes have around a 30% success rate. University College London study found that those smoking cigarettes were 60% more likely not to be smoking than those who used a licensed nicotine replacement therapy or nothing at all. Data from the Smokers Toolkit survey in England strongly supports this position. And I know and appreciate the concerns that the Minister has about younger people accessing, experimenting with e-cigarettes, but of course the UK government is taking action on that front. There's going to be a ban on younger people being able to purchase these sorts of things. That deals with the issue that the Minister is quite rightly concerned about. The Royal College of Physicians said if all the smokers in Britain stopped smoking cigarettes and started smoking e-cigarettes, we would save 5 million deaths in people who are alive today. It is a massive public health prize. I think we should take the opportunity to grasp that prize, not by punishing people who are using e-cigarettes as a tool to quit, but by supporting them in doing so. It's a useful, evidence-based fact that people are quitting smoking using e-cigarettes, Minister, and you cannot blindly ignore that evidence and continue to bury your head in the sand about it and be very selective in the evidence which you are very clearly trying to look at. I appreciate that the jury is still out on the long-term impact. No one disputes that at all. And we need to have, of course, constant gleaning of further evidence about the long-term effects of e-cigarettes use. But certainly they are appearing to help the public health outcomes for people, and we ought to not be knocking them as a result. A recent BBC poll, just on public views here, found that 75% of the public would be happy if their friends or family switched from smoking tobacco to using e-cigarettes, and that 62% of the public said that they shouldn't be banned in public places. I support the public view. Let's allow people the opportunity to use these to quit smoking and reduce public harm. Thank you.
And we are back in the room with Pete Dermody, who's still with us, and Sav, as per usual, myself, Dave Dawn. So, Pete, all of that going on down there in the Senedd in Wales, what do you make of it? What's kind of the feeling in Wales about it? What do Walians, Welsh people, need to do to get? Is it not Walians?
Not that I heard of.
Oh, right. What do they need to do to get this guy Drakeford to actually come down out of his ivory tower and see sense? Because during the course of that video, he was sat there. He was just about ready to pick his nose, and I'm quite surprised he didn't actually. He looked like Glance, just not taking any notice.
Well, I thought that the whole debate was quite positive, apart obviously from the Labour ministers. So there were 6 speakers, and 3 were pro, and we had 1 on the fence and 2 sort of anti. And I think if we can get Ellen Jones, who's Plaid Cymru, if we can get her from the fence and actually on our side, and we've got the 4-2 split, I think that would work good in our favour. With regards to what we can do, I think the public consultation ends on the 24th of June.
Right.
So I'm sure we'll be able to tweet a link or something to actually, you can download a Word document and provide feedback and send that back. So I think that's what Welsh vapers need to do. We also need to educate Ellen Jones and try to bring her over onto our side, and obviously bombard Mark Drakeford with loads of tweets.
Well, yes, I did tweet earlier that I thought Mark Drakeford would benefit by watching tonight's show and listening to what Professor West had to say, and I think it might not be a bad idea if he hasn't been watching. And if you are watching, Mark, please make yourself known in chat. But if he hasn't been watching, then it's probably a good idea for everybody in the UK, actually. In fact, for everybody in the EU to tweet Mark Drakeford, because it is at Mark Drakeford, isn't it?
Yes, I believe that is
yes,
right.
I think that's his Twitter handle. Tweet him, get him to have a watch, because I think Professor West was telling it like it is. So how serious do you think this is as a threat then, Pete? I mean, are we talking about a done deal here, or do you think that the Senedd is going to be open to some kind of education and a campaign of actually talking to these folks? Because it certainly looks as though the Lib Dems and the Conservatives and probably Plaid Cymru would be approachable to speak to. Does that seem sensible?
That does seem sensible. What my concern is like what Mark Drakeford said, was like Cardiff University, Wetherspoons, football stadiums, and all this, and they're bringing the ban before there's actually a ban. So you could find that there's a public ban in most places anyway before there's actually any legislation, because of the knee-jerk reaction.
Yes, I think. I mean, Robert West was saying earlier that he doesn't have a problem if a given venue decides for whatever reason that they don't want to allow vaping. That as a former business owner myself, yeah, I would always hope that I had the choice as to what was and was not allowed on my premises, assuming legality thereof. And I've got to say, I always rued the day that the smoking ban came in, because I thought it was incomparable with public choice and personal freedoms. So yes, but I do think as well that perhaps we need to be looking at a campaign of information and education on the likes of Wetherspoons, and to be talking to places of employment. The tools are there when you think about it, aren't they, really? I mean, the first part of the show tonight says everything. If there had been no smoking ban, if it had only been vaping, there is no scientific argument for a ban on vaping in public places. And I think that's a quote that we can take away with us. So what sort of plea have you got for Welsh vapers then, Pete? And what would you like, English, Irish and Scottish vapers and European vapers to do to help you out?
Well, obviously, the people, the only people who can sort of reply to this sort of public consultation are people from Wales. So people from England and Ireland or whatever can't help us with that. I think all we can ask for your help is to sort of bombard Mark Drakeford with loads of tweets, please.
We will. I think we can call that a done deal, and they're probably happening even now. And I know, Sav, you said that there was quite a reaction to that video. Is there much we can share?
Well, I'll kind of break it down into chunks, and there's not a lot I can read out.
He's that popular, is he?
Yeah, I mean, the Lib Dem lady at the beginning, chat liked. The Labour lady they didn't like, and they didn't like a cardigan either.
Was it a cardigan?
We're not sure, but they really didn't like it.
See, I'd heard that she was naked, in which case whatever it was she was wearing definitely needed ironing.
Definitely, but the dress sense didn't go down well.
I'm sorry, because we said exactly the same.
Yes. Moonlit said, if tobacco companies make money selling non-tobacco products instead of tobacco products, that's a win. And also said, perhaps it's time to photocopy the label off a bottle and blow it up to banner size so they can finally see the ingredients. Gary Dibley has said, one thing that gets me, they all say we've spoken to folk and they say they want to quit. How many in chat have been spoken to?
That's a good question.
Isn't it? Especially from Gary.
Well,
Gary.
That was a bit cutting, wasn't it? Go on then, chat. If you're Welsh and you're in chat, have you been spoken to? If you have, say aye. Don't worry, Sav, there'll not be any.
No. I'll get on to Mark Drakeford. I've condensed it down to one comment, and I won't say who it was from because it's kind of the feeling from the entire chat room, and it went something along the lines of, "Oh, shut up, you ass clown."
Was it as polite as that?
It was actually. That was the most polite one I could use.
Okay.
That was the only one that got through the swear filter.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What more have we got to add?
Getting on to Darren Miller. Jester says this guy is brilliant. John Not Matt says, so it was fine to send Welsh friends and workers down the mine, breathing and all that stuff, but not fine to take care of your health by switching to an e-cig.
Valid point.
Vaping Sam says, I think it's time politicians are made to wear their funding literally on their sleeve like race car drivers do. Mitch Dog said...
I like that one.
I know, it's brilliant.
It's good, that.
Mitch Dog says, evidence reference again, love it. It demonstrates we are right. What more is needed? Liam D. Vapor says, you can hear the real belief in the voices of the people using the evidence. Lorraine has said, I like their own lies being used against them. Gary's on a roll today. Gary says, I like when folk just don't go with the flow and look at what is actually put before them. And Bob has said, this is great stuff. Pity it's falling on deaf ears a lot of the time.
Yes, it is. It is a great shame. It is a great shame. But I think it's safe to say, because I'm going to try and draw this all to a close now, and again, our apologies for running over. And our apologies as well for not being able to get to every question that was asked of Professor West in chat, but he actually had agreed to do the first 20 minutes and gave us over half an hour, and I really, it's more than we could possibly have asked for. So if you're watching, Robert, thank you again so much. You've got no idea what it means to everybody gathered here, and I sincerely hope, by God, when did you turn into a cloud chaser, Mrs.
Leave me alone.
You waited out there. I sincerely hope that his words do not fall on deaf ears, and I hope they're promulgated far and wide. Before we took the streams live, we had discussions about certain personalities, shall we say, in the ants movement. And I'm not going to name them because I don't want to embarrass Professor West, but let's just say he opines that they're not very good at mathematics and probably are not really aware on how to do a study with proper methodology. I think that's probably a good point to leave it, but as ever, we need to chuck it across to Sav for the last word for chat. But before I do, Pete, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know you were a bit nervous and wary of it all, but have you found it an easy enough ride?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for having me.
It's our great pleasure. I'm just sorry I've been flying about like a paper kite so much over the last few weeks that I wasn't able to get to it in a more timely manner. But as they say, better late than never. At least that's what I'm told. So Sav, what have we got? The sage words from chat that you usually find.
The last words from chat are actually coming as huge thank yous to both guests to the show. They have thoroughly enjoyed it. But the final word tonight goes to Max Drum, and he says bubblegum.
Bubblegum. Yes. My enormous thanks both to Professor Robert West and to Pete Dermody for joining Sav and myself tonight. I hope you found the programme informative, educational and uplifting. There is much to do in this battle. There are many conversations that will be had over the days and weeks and months that are coming on. There's all kinds of stuff is going to be happening, but I think I'm safe in saying that the Vapor's voice will be heard. Now, I know Lorian's been off at Smoke Free Southwest during the course of today. I'm going to be having a natter with her at some juncture before next Thursday, and I hope we're going to be able to get a report about what happened down there. Vapor's voices are being heard. Let everybody's voice be heard as much as is humanly possible. And if you felt like going out to vote, you're too late to shut. Right, that's it from us. Thank you so much for watching, and until we see you next time, all together now, vape on, vape hard, and don't let the bastards grind you down. Till the next time we see you, take care. Ta-da. Say bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.